Humankind has been trying to answer a question for a very long time, and that question is, where did our physical universe come from? There is a more fundamental question, though, that's often overlooked, and I think even more interesting. And that question is, where did the laws of nature come from that provide the structural framework for the physical universe in the first place? The answer to that question is the Apaurusheya Bhashya. Apaurusheya Bhashya are Sanskrit words that translate as uncreated commentary. To translate that a step further, we're talking about the natural and sequential unfoldment of all the laws of nature from the unmanifest pure consciousness in the form of the Ved. Now, maybe that needs to be translated a little bit further, but for the sake of this video, let's assume you know what I'm talking about. To illustrate the Apaurusheya Bhashya, and specifically the first 5 letters of it, which form AGNIM, I brought a deck of cards. Now this is a little different deck of cards because, as you can see, the faces are all blank. And you might be wondering, why are we dealing with blank cards here? What's the point of that? And the reason is, what kind of card could illustrate pure consciousness better than a blank card? Because a blank card has all the properties of pure consciousness. Let's start with one of them. So here's pure consciousness. We know that pure consciousness is infinite in its nature. It has to be infinite, or else how could we have an infinite world? So pure consciousness as its first expression takes on the form of awe. If you can see that. Now awe has to be totality, has to be infinity from a vibrational standpoint, because just think about it. When you make the sound ah, there's no restriction on the sound. It's complete, total, pure, full sound. Any other sound that you make, e, u, n, it's all some kind of closure on the sound ah. So in that sense, ah is the basis that all other specific vibrational expressions come from. And that's how we know that ah is infinity, and that ah, of course, has to be the first expression of the Apaurusheya Bhashya, and fortunately, it is. Otherwise, we couldn't have the world that we live in. But we need more than just infinite potentiality, as we'll talk about in a moment. Fortunately, it's the nature of ah to collapse to ga. Now, ga is specific. Ga is a specific point. It is not infinite potentiality, it's complete specificity. And you can feel that if you make the sound ga in your throat, there's a point. There's not multiple gas. Ah goes on forever. Ga is specific. You could have ga, 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 but each one is its own specific point. Ga is always a point. And what also makes it that point value vibrationally compared to any other closures is that ga is a closure in the back of the throat, which is where the sound begins in the first place. So it's the most pure and complete point value that there can be. So we have, right now we have pure consciousness, which forms ga. And to get back to that, we'll recap for a moment. We have pure consciousness. It takes the form of ah, and then ah collapses to ga. So you can see the sequence here. Pure consciousness, ah, pure consciousness, ga. It's the collapse and the gaps. These are the gaps. And now we've got the whole universe, infinity and specific. That's how we have a specific world to live in with infinite possibilities. But let's go a little further than that, because there is more. It's worth understanding more here. So we have another gap after ga. I'm going to put the next gap down here. So it flows like this and then comes back across. So what would you think comes next after ga? We've already got infinity and point. What else could there be? And actually what we have, we need a commentary on this infinity and point to describe more of its detail. And that is why this gap takes on the form of na. So na is a universal sound for negation. It seems to be built into the sound itself, across languages, across cultures. And that's kind of a natural meaning to the sound. And what na is doing here is it's commenting on what's come before to say that yes, we have infinity, we have point, we have totality, we have specifics, but it's still all unmanifest. Na is saying that everything that's been described so far is still unmanifest. But there's more. It's important to know that even while the creation is unmanifest, it is also it is also full of energy. It is also lively. Even though it's unmanifest, it has energy, which is essential for how the creation comes to be in the first place. So let's recap. We have the gap, the pure consciousness here, which then takes on the form of na, and then from the gap following na, we get E. There's another property of E that's important to know, is that E has a curving back nature to it. And so it sends the energy back the way it came from. So now you have the natural energy of pure consciousness collapsing forward towards E, but then the energy is shooting back. And what happens, those two energies basically hit each other, or almost hit each other, and they create a whirlpool effect, which is the basis for the actual creation to come forth. So, of course, we need another gap after E, and we're going to get the whirlpool. To get the last letter of AGNIM, you might be able to guess is So, here comes the whirlpool. The spin of the whirlpool. And that is ma. And thus we have AGNIM and the beginning of the Apaurusheya Bhashya, the beginning of Rig Veda, and the seed of the whole creation.